All right, guys, today we are going to do a little boat maintenance on Nathan's motor here. It's going to be replacing the thermostats, or I should say cleaning them out, just checking them. It's something good to do. Basically, the reason that they get clogged up is these motors, they have a TorqueMaster 2 lower unit, and there's actually a little intake hole on the front, like the nose cone area. It's like a low water pickup, and that makes it really susceptible to sucking in debris and stuff. So if you think about your thermostats, basically what it is it's a little valve that kind of keeps the cooling of your motor until it gets to a certain temperature, then it opens up and lets you go. It's really important for these Optimax motors for that to happen. If you are having like 4 beeps on your motor or on your boat, it's telling you usually that it's going to be a thermostat. It can be a lot of different things, but a lot of times a thermostat is going to be your big issue. So we'll crack this cowling open real quick and we'll get to the thermostats and we'll show you exactly what you need to do. It's really easy, but it's just something that's, you know, can save you a lot of headache if you're traveling somewhere, you're doing something that you can get this done. So you get your latches undone, you got one here, one on the other side, one on the front, and you're basically gonna come back here and you're gonna hit up on this part here, and that's gonna lift your cowling up, and then you take it off. Okay, as far as tools you're gonna need here, it's pretty basic. You're gonna need a ratchet with a little extension, a little swivel head works good with an 8mm socket. I like to also have an 8mm open end wrench. That's going to be really key to help get some of these tight spaces here. Then I just use a 1/2 inch ratchet, 15mm socket, and then a torque wrench if you want to get down to the nitty gritty to torque your fuel rails back to help get that out of the way. A flat screwdriver to help scrape your gaskets or whatever else you want to use. Get that out of the way. And these are the gaskets here. So they're simple. They're just like a cardboard style felt or whatever. We will put this part number here in the description, everything you have to purchase it. So that's the tools you're gonna need. It's pretty basic and really won't take you too long. All right, so we got the cowling off. You have 2 thermostats in your Pro XS motors. You got one up here, it's this little square area, and your other one is over here. So the first thing we're gonna do is loosen up these fuel rails. So you have a fuel rail here and a fuel rail here. Now here's arguably one of the most important parts of the entire process, and that is releasing the pressure on these fuel rails, especially if you use them recently. It's gonna have pressure built up. If you don't do this, you can actually blow an O-ring out to your injector, and then your little quick project here turns into a big ordeal. You're gonna probably have to take it to a dealer to get this fixed. So what you have is this little Schrader valve right here. So you can just take anything, like the end of a socket, whatever, and push this pin in. You got one here, and then you have one right here. So we'll go ahead and we'll push them in and just make sure there's no pressure. There's probably nothing on these right now because he hasn't used it for a while, but make sure that's like a very important thing to do if you just use the motor. And then after that, we're gonna take these bolts right here and we're gonna back them off a little bit. And there's gonna be the same thing on the other side. It's not a big deal. Just back them off a little bit, and that's gonna help you pull the rails off just slightly, and it's gonna help you access these a little bit more. Now, something I wanna talk about with these rails is when you back them off, you don't necessarily wanna just pull the whole thing out. You're gonna have basically like a main injector that seats, or a main O-ring that seats inside that. And what you don't wanna do is pull them apart from the fuel rail. You wanna pull it kind of like out of the head almost. But when we get to that point, we'll kind of zoom in on it and I'll show you. You don't have to move it much. You basically just wanna have a little bit of movement to give you a little wiggle room to make this a little bit easier. All right, we went ahead and we loosened up the main studs here. They're 15mm socket. And now we're gonna kind of rock this fuel rail back and forth, pull it off just a little bit, and that's gonna give us a little bit of room to get to the thermostats. So you kind of just wanna rock this back and forth, and you can kind of pull it back a little bit. You can kind of feel like this one popped back just a little bit. It's not gonna move much. That's what I wanna reiterate, is that you shouldn't be able to like really pull this thing back. You really just wanna give yourself enough room to kind of work in here a little bit. So next we're gonna take this off here, which is an 8mm, and we'll do the exact same thing we did with the fuel rail on the other side as well. But we'll go ahead and we'll take this thermostat off and kind of show you what it looks like in there. All right, we're gonna go ahead and take this top one off here. Little swivel sockets and stuff do help for some of them. This one's straight, you could use a straight one, but I also have an open-ended wrench to get this other one off back here. Okay, so we're gonna get that one loose. I'm gonna take my glove off, put that to the side. All right, now I like to use a little wrench for this one right here in particular. Again, if you wanted to take your fuel rail and stuff totally out, like off, it's an option, but I feel like you're risking too much with these O-rings and stuff, trying to reinsert them all the time. I think it's easier just to use a little open-ended wrench and kind of fight this one a little bit to get it out. It takes a little bit longer, but to me, it's just a little bit easier and it's less potential headache. So this one, you just start to loosen up and get it going a little bit, and then you can use your finger to pretty much kind of get it the rest of the way out once you get a little bit of tension off there. All right, so here's one thermostat we took out. Here's kind of the hole it looks like. It's all said and done. We'll look over here. I'll pop this one out. So this is what it's gonna look like when you take your little cover off, and just take like a screwdriver. You can take kind of a knife or something and get behind that seal and pop it out. Now we'll show you kind of what you're looking for on these. These are a little bit dirty, but they're not clogged by any means. But what happens is they get clogged, like you'll end up getting little like sediment, you can get wood chips, whatever, in between here. So as this heats up, this gets around, I think 120 or 130 degrees, somewhere in that range is when this actually opens and it expands. And you'll get rocks or any type of debris, something that you've been in shallow water, and it will just keep this open. So then what happens is you launch your boat the next day or you're using it later, and this thermostat's always open and it never lets your motor get to the correct operating temperature. And that is basically a killer to these motors right here, is when they're not getting warm enough. You usually should let them get to about 120 degrees or let your thermostat cycle once before you really run these motors hard. So it's very important to look at these. So we're gonna take these inside, we're gonna put them in some water, just a pot of boiling water, make sure that they're operating, opening, and then we'll go ahead and reinstall them. All right, we're boiling them, and if you look in here, you can see they're starting to open up a little bit. I don't know how well you can see, but you can see they're starting to get a little gap in there. This one's a little more open than that one right now. But that's what you're looking for. You wanna make sure that these basically open up all the way. If you put them in there or something and they're not opening, they're not functioning, or say you've been getting like 4 beeps or whatever, and you look at your thermostats, that's something to look at. If they're not functioning, then you need to go ahead and replace them. All right, so got our thermostats out now. We're just gonna put them in, super easy. It doesn't matter really which direction they go in, anything like that. It's pretty self-explanatory as far as that goes. All right, then you're gonna replace your gaskets. So here's the little part number. We'll put this in the description if you need them, but they're just simple little like felt style cardboard gaskets. Really simple. Just match it up with here on the bolt holes, and you put your cover back on, and you're good to go on your thermostats. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put our gasket on here, but before you do that, it's very important to just make sure you scrape the old gasket off here and on here. A lot of times they rip, and you'll have some on the motor and you'll have some on this little part here, so just make sure that's off, otherwise you're gonna get some leaking going on. So again, just line up your bolts. It's pretty simple here, and start it by hand and then tighten her down with your ratchet or your wrench, depending on which bolt it's on. And that's really all there is to actually doing the thermostats. And then we'll talk about torquing these back down, your fuel rails back down to spec, so you get them right. We'll go over that here in just a second. All right, so we got our thermostats back in, they're tightened down. Technically the torque spec's like 100 inch-pounds, but just tight's tight, too tight's broke. It's not crazy, you just need to make sure it's tight enough that the gasket is going to basically keep the water from pouring out. So don't get too caught up on that. But what is really important are these fuel rails here. So you want your torque wrench for this. Again, if you're like in a bind somewhere, you don't have the right tools, do your best just to feel it out. The torque spec on these is 35 foot-pounds. So we'll go ahead and get these torqued down with the torque wrench here. And then that's pretty much all you have to your thermostats. So again, just keep an eye on them, try and keep them clean. If you have a SmartCraft Mercury gauge, which I would recommend everybody have on their boat, they should come standard with the price that you pay for these, but they don't. Around 120 degrees, a little bit north of that, but I think about 130 is whenever they open up. But generally, the rule of thumb is you want your motor to be at 120 degrees before you start running it hard. So keeping up with your thermostats, keeping it clean, and most importantly, if you're in shallow water, if you're a shallow water fisherman, and you've got this TorqueMaster 2 gear case here, it's got those low water pickups in the front, trim that motor up a little bit. You start getting in silt, wood, stuff like that, it'll clog up all the time and you'll be fighting all the time. But if you just take the time to trim that motor up a little bit, you'll save yourself a lot of headaches. So hopefully this video helped you, and just help you do kind of your own maintenance, keep on top of it. I like to know how things work. I like to do a lot of things myself. That way, if I'm on a trip somewhere, I'm fishing somewhere, I'm not totally relying on somebody to do some of the work for me. I kind of know what's going on. So again, hopefully it helps, and thanks for watching, guys.